right, so our next speaker is James Barker, who is known as a psychic, a skeptic, and an author. Since he can first remember, James Barker has experienced. Since he can first remember, James Barker has experienced precognitive dreams or premonitions, time and again proving to come true. In 2007, he dreamt of a murder and saw the murderer's surname, and a few months later, it came true. It was at that point that James committed to enter the Australian Skeptics $100,000 challenge for anyone with proof of paranormal phenomena. In this highly entertaining and fascinating talk, James walks us through his experiences, his detailed records and analysis, and the Australian Skeptics' response. Please welcome James Barker.
Okay, as Russell said, my name is James Barker, and I call myself the psychic skeptic. I call myself this because, as Russ said, ever since I can remember, I've had dreams that have come true. I've seen ghosts, but only when I've been asleep or in the twilight between sleeping and waking. And I've got a highly developed sixth sense, but I've got no control of that sixth sense. I'm also a skeptic. I've been searching for evidence of the paranormal for the last 6 to 10 years. And what I've found is a lot of evidence of ESP and precognitive dreams. What I've done is I wrote a book called Paranormal 101, and in that book I detailed all my experiences, but I've also detailed all the evidence that I've found over the years. So in this book it contains the factual evidence of ESP, etc., but I also delve into reincarnation, ghosts, which I think everybody sees every day, out-of-body experiences, all that kind of stuff. I started a chapter on psychic performers, which grew and grew and grew, and after about 3 years, it became its own book, which I've called Rating Psychics, and an industry laid bare, where I look at 8 of the most famous psychics in the world and look at the evidence of whether they're really communicating with the dead. Now, to begin with, the one thing that I think is common is this ESP kind of connection, and death messages are already being proven by non-psychic people. There are many examples. My partner, who is an experienced senior nurse, she has had many times where her family of patients have come and seen her and said, my relative is dead, and they've known before anyone else. They've either rung up or they've turned up because they have known that that person has died. Dr. Gordon Fould, who is the 2016 Senior Australian of the Year, was also a very experienced high-level doctor. He is quoted as saying that there is this phenomenon where people seem to know when a loved one has died, they get a message. Now, what I'd like to do is take that another step further, and this brings us to precognitive dreams. The only difference being, there's a couple of differences. The sleep state, the person receiving the dream is normally in a deep or light sleep. The dream is very, very vivid. It's through others' eyes, and it's very emotional. You can wake up crying. You can wake up laughing. It normally wakes you up. It's that emotional. The one thing I do not understand and I have no answer for is that the messages from the future. I think there are 3 components that make up a precognitive dream. There's the transmitter. This is usually somebody that's going through a very they're dealing with a lot of pain or trauma or stress, and they tend to transmit the message. I've seen people in a plane crash. I've dreamt through the eyes of the person being on that plane crash. And then you've got a receiver. and the receiver, there can be many receivers, I guess, are picking up the signals that are being transmitted. And then we have the message, which is being transmitted from the future. There is so much evidence. I'm a military historian, and I was amazed as I kept reading these history books, how they gave a very quick reference to someone having a precognitive dream or a premonition, but then it was just dismissed. It was just a one-off. But when you kept seeing them happening in different books, you realise that there's a pattern. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but if you're interested, take a note of the name Major Claude Wallace. He was he didn't call himself a psychic, but he had premonition dreams. When he was in Africa, he was a major during World War I. When he was in Africa before the war, he dreamt of a mine collapse. And because of that, he was able to save the people. He got them out of the mine before it collapsed. Then in World War I, he was a major on the front line during the Battle of the Somme, I think it was, and he kept having a premonition. He kept dreaming of this great naval battle, and he knew he had to be there. And he obviously knew the right people because he went and got permission to visit the fleet. But he said, no, I don't want to go yet. I'm going to wait until the premonitions become so intense that I know the battle's about to begin. The premonitions became very intense, so he made his way to the coast of France, and he happened to have lunch with 3 high-ranking people. One of them was a priest, and they asked him what he was doing, and he said, I'm going to Scapa in Scotland to go out with the fleet because I've dreamt of this terrific naval battle. So those 3 people stand witness to him telling them before the event. He arrived at Scapa the day that the fleet was setting sail. He jumped on the battleship, and as a result, he was the only soldier to be present at the Battle of Jutland, which was the largest sea battle of World War I. It was the first major clash of the British and German fleets. As a result, he wrote a book about it. The first Sea Lord asked to see him because he wanted to hear what had happened, and he's never been discredited. And historians today actually quote from Claude Wallace. And if you check out the official lists for the battleships at the Battle of Jutland, Claude Wallace is listed among them. And he's the only soldier that can wear the medals, or could have worn the medals, for the Battle of Jutland. Just recently, it was discovered that Winston Churchill had a dream that, and he told his friend this when they were young, that in the future there would be a tremendous invasion by an unknown means, and that he will oversee the defence of England, specifically London, and avert disaster. Was this why Churchill acted as leading the UK in World War II was his destiny? Is this why he was so brave when younger? Now, you can probably see me, but I can't see you, so I just want to make sure I'm still there and not talking to a screen. Oh, good, I can see you all.
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah, good. So today there is Christopher Robinson. He calls himself the Dream Detective. He helped UK police. He carried out what was called the Arizona experiments by Dr. Gary Schwartz, where he would dream that night. The next day they would be given a random location. They would drive out to that random location, and lo and behold, it fitted exactly with what Christopher Robinson had dreamt. He was brought to Dr. Schwartz's attention because earlier he'd alerted the police to things like the IRA bombing a bank, which came true. He also, there's a YouTube clip on this, where he was so concerned about an attack at a RAF base in England that he went to that RAF base and nearly got arrested. As a result of him being there, security was heightened, and 2 weeks later, the RAF police discovered a car bomb outside of a photo equipment store. And that fitted exactly with what he had told them. He'd written down photo equipment, Stanmore RAF bomb. It's also claimed, I can't verify this, but it is also claimed that he predicted 9/11. And this is supposed to be a drawing from Saturday, August 5th, 2000. Again, as I say, throughout the years of reading military history, I kept coming across many examples of premonitions. One is Elizabeth Edmondson. In 1939, at the start of World War II, Elizabeth and her son John, who they called Jack, they decided that they would both start a diary, so at the end of the war, they could compare notes. Jack then joined the army, but Elizabeth, before he joined the army, Elizabeth had this terrible nightmare. She dreamt that she saw her son in this fortification or enclosure, and he was dying, and she put it in a diary. It terrified her. Her son then joined the regular army and he went overseas, but Elizabeth kept having this nightmare, as she documents in a diary. After about approximately a year, she had the most horrific nightmare of her son dying, and consequently, unexplainedly, on that same day, the cat went nuts. It ran around the house, meowing, screaming, and disappeared. And she wrote all this in a diary. A few days later, she got a telegram that her son had been killed in Tobruk in an enclosure, just as she'd dreamed it. Now, she wrote in her diary the date that she had the nightmare, and that corresponded with the date that her son died. Now, he was thousands of miles away. How could she have known? Getting back to my dreams, I became ill from around 2006. I got bad back and nerves and nervous system and chronic lung disease. So I can only sleep on my back. That's a staged photo. I find it difficult to sleep, and I don't dream very often. So I'm going to go into some of my dreams, but I'm only going to stick to the facts, except for the first dream. And the reason for this is, with the first dream, it will kind of give you some background into my reasoning. In 1993, I just got back from New Zealand, and as a result, I was staying with my parents while I found a house. And this night, I had a dream of a horse race. First time ever that I dreamt of a horse race. I saw 3 horses cross the line, but I could only remember the name of the second horse. So that morning, I went across the road, bought a newspaper, and I'm looking through the horse racing guide to find the name. And Mum walked in and she said, did you have a dream? And I said, yeah, I dreamt of a horse race. And she said, okay, we'll put $5 win in a place for me. I said, Mum, no, it's going to come second. So she said, all right, $10 on a place. So I found the name. I went to the TAB. I had to get help because I'd never betted on a horse before. And that afternoon, Mum and I were listening to all the radios on in the house, and the horse race ran, and the horse came second, and we were rapt. We were so pleased. And then something happened I didn't expect. There was a protest, and I said to Mum, I I didn't see that. I didn't dream that. But fortunately, the protest was dismissed. But ever since that dream, it's made me very wary of putting money where my dreams are because, yeah, that protest could have killed everything. Also, I've spoken about precognitive dreams and how they fit a pattern, the sleep state, vivid, emotional, etc. But then, just over a year or so ago, I had something which blew all that away. It wasn't vivid, it wasn't emotional. The dream involved me. I was with my family in a car. Mum and I were in the back, and my mum's dead now, so I was dreaming about my dead mum, and she told me about all the 3 sevens and then said all the sevens. And I thought, I bet this is to do with lotto, but I'd started posting my dreams on Facebook onto my Psychic Skeptic page, but I didn't think this one was precognitive. It just didn't fit the rules. However, I wasn't going to take the chance of it not being a warning about lotto. So I told my sister. My sister told my niece. They're both scientists. So I think they're fairly good witnesses, even though they're related. And then I forgot about it because my memory's terrible. I'm on some really good painkillers. And as a result, my memory's bad. My sister rang me later that night because it was a Saturday. It was Saturday lotto. And she said, "Oh, James, you're good." And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Lotto, 3 sevens came out, 7, 37, 27. Now, unfortunately, at the time, I didn't realise you just needed 3 numbers to win to get money. I won $100. I would have bet a lot bigger if I'd have known, because I ended up going with those 3 numbers and guessing others in the hope of winning. So all I can say, I don't understand why I had the dream, why it was with Mum. It was a very different format, but please, Mum, tell me more numbers. And I do try and dream of lotto. So yes, I won 100. We're not a big gambling family. My sister won 20, my niece won 30. Before all this, though, and I'm sticking to the facts here, only stuff I can verify. In 2019, I had a very, very vivid dream, and I was pretty sure it was precognitive, and they're very rare that they're that strong. And so I didn't have my Skeptic Facebook page, so I decided I was going to post it on my normal Facebook page. It was that strong, and so I did. And the next day, sorry, I should go back to the dream. I saw a man, he was a father, he was swimming fairly out in the water. He might have been body surfing. And then I saw this shark in the water, and I got the feeling he died. And it was so strong, I then posted about it. The very next day, an older man was killed by a shark swimming off Maui. Now, this was before shark attacks were so common. The previous death from a shark had been over a year ago. So the night that the day I'd posted this dream, which is verifiable, the next day a man was killed by a shark. Now, as a one-off, yet we could say coincidence, but you're going to see it fits into a pattern. So then on Facebook, on my Skeptic Psychic, I started posting my dreams. I'm not going into all of them. One of the main ones that I had in October 7th, which was about a week or two before I did this speech my first time, I dreamt of 2 miners with hard hats, and they were very pale. Consequently, a couple of days later, 2 miners in WA died. So I don't know whether that was related, but I saw a close-up of the mouth of one, and he said the word sabre. Now, on this particular night, I was trying to dream of lotto, and instead I was getting shared letters and stuff, which I couldn't remember. So I got back to sleep. I saw this sabre. I woke up. I emailed myself sabre, because I thought maybe it's a share. And then when I'd woken up, I searched and there was a share called Sabre, and they're into lithium battery mining. But I had no price, I had no timing, so it was very, very vague. But it was such a strong message that I decided I was going to buy. And I'm not rich. I've got a self-managed super fund, and I decided this time I was going to bet big for me. So I bought $10,000 worth of Sabre shares, and so after a month. So I think it was October, so in November, the share price then went from .004 to .040, which is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You may think there's a buck coming. So technically, I did very well. So I would have made around 68,000. The bad news is I think the universe was playing a joke on me because it was a consolidation. The good news is that since buying, though, it's continued to go up. They've had a couple of discoveries. However, this is not a recommendation to buy Sabre. This is my own dream experiment, and please, no one risk your own money. I'm not a share professional, and who knows, it's probably already gone up as much as it's going to go up. I'm just fortunate it didn't go down so far. Then, so again, sticking to the facts and stuff that can be proven. December 23rd, and again, with my Facebook page, I don't delete anything and I don't edit anything. So nothing's changed on there. December 23rd, 2022, I had a dream, but I woke up overheating. So whether that corrupted it or not, I don't know. I saw the numbers 4, 5, and 7. 4 and 5 came out. March 25th was the next time I dreamt of numbers. I dreamt of sequential numbers starting at 8, but I couldn't remember which numbers. I just knew that they were all kept low after that. So I then got a system 9. Oops. And as you can see, this is the actual entry. My numbers go from 8 to 16, and I got 5 numbers. So I'm showing you that I've had 3 lotto dreams or number dreams, and each of those dreams has a significant result, much better than you would expect with chance. In June 25th, 2023, I dreamt of a large meteor. The next day there was a large, and I posted that. Next day on the news was about a large meteor passing very close to Earth. 29th of July 2023, that was difficult. I dreamt of a helicopter plummeting to the ground and becoming a pancake. And when I woke up, it was on the news, and they said they were searching for survivors, and I couldn't write anything on my Facebook page because I'd seen the helicopter as a pancake, and I knew in my mind that there were no survivors, but I thought it irresponsible and disrespectful to post anything about it. So coming back to the skeptics and my reasoning, I just wanted to bring you up to date with my dreams to date to provide some validation, but also going back to the skeptics, and Russ spoke about the murder. In January 2006, I had one of my worst and most vivid dreams ever. It was a young girl, through the eyes of a young girl, being tortured in a small room with a stable-like door. It turned out that this door that I'd seen was a disabled door, and the bottom half was of like metallic covering, and the top was wood, and that's why it looked like it was in 2 halves. The attacker had a cigarette in his mouth, and the strong feeling was I would never escape. I was going to die. And I saw a building. It was King Arthur's Revolving Restaurant, this small motel in Perth. And I thought the girl was a lot younger than my daughter, and I thought if some young girl goes missing, I'll know where to tell the police to go. In July 2006, a young girl was abducted and tortured in disabled toilets. It's unknown if Arthur's had a cigarette in his mouth. I can't find that out. The little girl with bones broken died. Note the name Arthur's, not Arthur. But unfortunately, my dream was of no help, which seems to be a common occurrence with precognitive dreams, in that we're like a radio set. We're just receiving information. There's not much we can do with it. It was then that I saw the Skeptics $100,000 challenge, and I thought I would be helping the scientific community understand precognitive dreams, that the skeptics would be interested in studying the paranormal. Boy, was I wrong. So I let them know occasionally I have a dream that's like watching a scene through someone else's eyes. All I can do is tell you what I see. Unfortunately, I screwed up, because instead of just telling them what I saw, I told them what I emoted. I told them my impressions, and it would have been so much better if I had just told them exactly what I'd seen. I was put on to the president of the WA group, Dr. John Haps, and I got the impression that he was acting more like a gatekeeper, keeping me at arm's length. Nothing formal was set up. I was supposed to be in their media. It was supposed to be publicised whether I won or failed, but they didn't seem to really want to mention me. I ended up asking Dr. Lance Storm from the South Australian University to be a third-party witness. Fortunately for me, because I have no control of when I'm going to have these dreams, October 1st, I sent a dream to Dr. Haps. I said I saw Kevin Rudd, the leader of the opposition. He wasn't that popular then. I'd seen his wife. I didn't know her name, had died, because I'd seen her standing next to a grave. But again, this is where I've stuffed up, because I'm interpreting it, which I shouldn't have. Pretty sure it's an exaggeration that she was just injured. I saw a hole in the ground, so hopefully she just trips or falls and isn't hurt too bad, and it isn't a grave. Now, my partner said to me, "You said it isn't a grave," and I said, "No, that's not what I meant. I said, I hope it isn't a grave, but the fact is I saw her standing next to one," and that's all I should have written. 2 weeks later, an Australian soldier, SAS trooper, died in Afghanistan. Up until the time I'd had my dream, no soldiers had been killed in Afghanistan for 5 years. I'd never seen Teresa Rain at any funerals. I'd never seen her on the news or other dreams or anything. The SAS trooper was buried. He wasn't cremated. And then Teresa Rain attended the funeral, and Sky News, as part of the advertising news montage, they included a clip of Teresa Rain at the funeral standing next to that grave, which I got to see day after day for the next couple of weeks. The skeptics called it a coincidence. Now, I've given you the good, this is the bad, this is the worst one that I've sent to them, and it was dream number 7. I promise you, I'm not going through them all. Dream number 7, I dreamt this morning of a dead Aboriginal man. There was a mask, which I interpreted as being Aboriginal. A lot of blood coming from his head. He was lying on a wooden floor, a pier. The pier was the main picture. So I still hadn't learnt by dream 7 to just put down what I'd seen. And then, again, interpreting it, my main concern was that the body was being broadcast on the news, which was against Aboriginal culture. It's got nothing to do with the dream. The next day, I know there was a connection, but I also know I can't prove it and that this evidence is really, really weak. But a man attacked his ex-girlfriend and tried to kill her, and it was next to the pier. So quite vague. I tried to defend it. A coincidence, and probably rightly so. Dream number 2. This was where I was going down a hill and I saw a truck or a bus. It was just a big vehicle coming towards me, and a baby crawling across the road. The image of the baby crawling across the road was really, really strong. I picked up the baby and took it, and I've quoted house numbers. I've tried to find out, but I've got no idea if these numbers are relevant. But the interesting thing here that my mum pointed out was there were 2 mothers, which I didn't get the first time. So I've seen the baby, 2 mothers, and it's the first time ever I've dreamt of a baby in a blanket going across the road. The last time I dreamt of a baby would have been 30 years ago, when I dreamt of a baby and I saw like a psychedelic thing going down their throat. 2 days later, we got a telegram that my wife's niece, their baby, had accidentally swallowed acid. Now, that was the last time I dreamt of a baby, 30 years ago. This time I dreamt of this baby, and 2 days later, a baby was kidnapped. However, I'd left out information. This was on a Monday. The Friday, a workmate had talked to me about Indigenous kids being out on the street at 3 o'clock in the morning or something. You know, he's going, where are their parents? They should have been looking after them. And I thought, okay, him talking about the Indigenous kids, that affected my dream. In my dream, the baby, the parent, everyone was Indigenous. And I'm thinking, was that because of what he said on Friday? I should have written it down exactly as I'd seen it. However, missing and kidnapped babies were really, really rare. Look at Cleo Smith's abduction in 2021. It made world headlines. So when the baby was abducted 2 days later, it was huge news. It was everywhere. The kidnapper was found heading up a hill to Northern. The baby, as could be expected, was in a blanket, and all the parties involved were Indigenous, and there were 2 mothers. But again, I dreamt of a baby. Second time in my life I dreamt of a baby. 2 days later, a baby is kidnapped, and it's suddenly huge news. Of course, skeptics' response, a coincidence. Dream 3, and now things start to get a little bit more specific. I was on a 5-day cruise of the Malacca Straits. I'd taken my daughter. We had a split cabin, so she was on the lounge thingy and I'm in the main bed, and it was the first night and I could not sleep, and it got around to 6 a.m. and finally I drifted off to sleep, and I saw a middle-aged man of similar height in my room. And again, another first, never experienced this before. He was in another dimension. I don't get it, don't understand. He told me I was the first person to see him. He told me that he would always be there. I asked him his name, and he told me it was Reuben, and that he was a swinger or a swimmer. He had an accent. Well, it turns out that it was probably a swimmer, but he wasn't very good at it, because funnily enough, I went to write down his name and I said to him, I'm not going to be able to do this, can I? Because I'm dreaming. And just at that instant, my daughter woke screaming, and she said she dreamt there was a man in the cabin. Now, I didn't tell her about this for many years, about the fact that there was a man in the cabin. I did lots of research. I went onto the really, really slow internet search using satellite download, searching for Reuben. I contacted the staff of the ship. They must have thought I'm nuts. I wanted to know if someone had died in the cabin. I also sent an email to the cruise company and they came back and said we can't disclose this information. Also to John Happs of the Skeptics and to Lance Storm, detailing exactly what had happened about my dream. The superstar Virgo, excuse me, it then stopped cruising the Malacca Straits, and for the next year, I think it was the Olympics or something, it went off and was cruising around Japan. And a year or so later, it came back to the Malacca Straits area. And this was when, 14 months later, an Indian man, slightly younger than me, according to a news article, had fallen overboard in suspicious circumstances and died. It is the only suspicious death on the superstar Virgo. Now, we can all say, yeah, coincidence, etc. But what I'd like to do now is show you exactly where I had the dream. So we came out of Singapore at night and I finally got to sleep about here. And this is where I had the dream or vision or whatever you want to call it. Now, coincidentally, in this area is where the man died. So considering the superstar Virgo would go all over the world, I happened to have my dream exactly where he died. Skeptic's response: it's a coincidence. I guess you're kind of getting the theme now. So John Happ said, okay, just send me some specific predictions with a timeline, nothing vague like an aircraft will crash. I hadn't told him an aircraft will crash. Sometime in the future, a movie star will die. I hadn't done that. Both are likely to occur, but when? Now, maybe it was my subconscious luck, I don't know. But then in December 2007, I dreamt of a shooting, a lone shooter at the Empire State Building in 2012. I sent John an email from my work computer in December, but unfortunately I had to stop working in January, so I don't have a copy of that email. I do have a copy of the next email where I was getting a bit grumpy, and I told him the only recently dated dream I have had, this is January 2008, is that there will be a major 9/11 type incident in New York in 2012, because I knew you had my first email, which detailed the Empire State Building. Is that detailed enough for you, or is that too vague? And normally I don't get a timestamp on a dream. I also filled in Dr. Lance Storm in 2010, and I had to go through the archives, but I found the email where Dr. Storm came back and said, and can you include the prediction, Premonition 2012, terrorist attack in New York, probably the Empire State Building. So there's the evidence, and Dr. Storm can testify that I'd spoken to him about this. And I think we also published it in one of the papers. Then in, I think it was July 2012, I discovered that my nephew, who in 2007 had been a schoolboy in WA, now worked in IT 1 block away from the Empire State Building. But like his dad, my brother, he's a skeptic. So I had to be very, very careful, but I wanted to warn him. So I tried to put it very lightly, and I said, because 5 years ago, I dreamt that a terrorist, note singular, a terrorist, attacked the Empire State Building in 2012. So please don't visit the building this year. I pressed send and then I panicked. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? If the CIA or FBI reads my email, they're going to think I'm a terrorist. And I've just involved my nephew. They're going to arrest my nephew. I couldn't sleep for days. My anxiety was up here. I didn't know what to do. Fortunately, neither of us got arrested. Unfortunately, approximately a month after sending this email to my nephew, a disgruntled worker approached the Empire State Building with a gun. He'd already killed a co-worker. He was engaged by 2 anti-terrorist police. 9 other people were wounded. And the press initially called it a terrorist attack. So this basically ticks all the boxes. 2012 Empire State Building, and it was initially classed as a terrorist attack. Now, my brother, the skeptic, tells me that shootings occur in the US all the time, especially in New York, blah, blah, blah. And I say to him that if you go to Google and you type in Empire State Building shooting, only 2 come up. This one in 2012 and the one in 1997. That's it. None others come up. You can go through pages after page. It's not a common occurrence. So me predicting a shooting in 2012, and there was nothing on the news from 2007 to 2012 on the Empire State Building shooting. So I would say it's not a coincidence. However, we know that the skeptics would say it's a coincidence. But in this case, they didn't say it's a coincidence. They didn't respond to me at all. So there we go. That's how have I gone for time? It helps if you press start with the timer. So there you go. I've sent the skeptics 7 dreams over 8 months. It wasn't a case of sending them hundreds and going, oh, look, 1 or 2 came right. I sent them 7. I think 6 of them were fairly pretty specific. And I would class it as getting at least over 70% accuracy, which is better than chance. I do have one final prediction, and that is that the skeptics will never, ever pay out that $100,000. So that's my story, sad but true. Thank you.
So I suspect there might be some questions from the audience. Would anybody like to ask James a question? No? Okay, yes, please. John.
Why did you
Big loud.
the strange happen to you?
What's that?
Why does it have to, he has these dreams?
Could you hear that?
No.
Okay, so it's the question is, why do you believe that you're having these kinds of dreams?
I think it is the sixth sense. I think a lot of us have a sixth sense. And I know that my mum had dreams. She dreamt of the Melbourne Cup winner once. My sister has dreams that come true as well. So it just seems to be something that we've inherited.
Yep, George.
How old were you when you first realised you were having these dreams?
How old were you when you first realised you were having these dreams?
I've just turned up my speakers. I used to, for example, I used to dream about what was going to happen at school the next day when I was first going to school, and I thought that was normal for everybody. And it was only later that I realised it wasn't. So I've always had these dreams. But as I've got older, they've got more rarer to have.
Jenny?
Do you find that you dream more if you journal your dreams?
Do you find that you dream more if you journal those dreams?
No, I don't. I find it's more, I try and think about things I want to dream about, and that does tend to influence it a little, but that's about it.
That's okay. Yeah. Yeah. How do you differentiate between a normal dream and a premonition?
Up until I had, excuse me, up until I had the dream of the 3 sevens, it was always through someone else's eyes, and it was very, very vivid. Maybe it's changing, I don't know, but it's becoming more difficult now, and that's why I'm putting all my dreams onto my Facebook page. But some, if it's through someone else's eyes and very, very vivid, then I know for sure that's a real dream.
A premonition. Okay. Yeah. Over here. You had one at the back? Oh, got it.
And what sleeping stage you would have these dreams?
What stage of sleeping do you have these dreams?
I think it's in the morning during the lighter sleep stage, the more the meditation-y type sleep stage. But again, like the Dante Arthur's one, they seem to punch through. Unfortunately, they're very, very rare, but they're so intense, and it's like the signal just punches through whatever layer of sleep you're at. But normally, yeah, the light sleep.
Predictions with dreams, but I have with numbers.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Well,
You just want to make that comment to James? Oh, we have a lady here who has dreams like that with numbers.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can see a hand going up. Someone at the back?
Yeah, she's speaking. Just for a moment, please.
Oh,
Okay.
the number comes to 1.
Yeah, right. Okay. So that's been successful strategy for you? Beautiful.
Numbers.
Okay. It just reminded me of a question that I had as well, James, is that you mentioned that you try to have dreams about lotto numbers.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you try to have a particular kind of dream?
it's just really focusing and just saying to yourself, lotto, lotto, lotto. But it doesn't really work. It just comes out of the blue. As you can see, I've only had really one. That when I tried the first time, I got the Sabre resources, and the second time is I got the sequential numbers from 8. That was my most successful attempt, and that's it.
It just sounds like the picking stocks is maybe your most successful strategy.
Yeah, maybe.
Any more stock predictions?
No, none. It's rare.
Well, I've got one other question. What sort of time frame do you have from having the dream to the dream sort of becoming real? Like, I know one was like a matter, I think, of like a couple of years, but
Couple of days.
how often do they normally happen? Like, you'd have a dream, and when does the event occur?
Yeah, again, I don't understand. Like with that first one to the skeptics about the grave, Theresa Rain standing next to the grave. If that had happened any other time, if it had happened later, they could have said, "Oh, the trooper died, so you knew there was going to be a service or whatever." It's just amazing. So it happened a month before, I think, 3 or 4 weeks before it happened. I guess I can't get my head around. I think, like with the Dante's Arthurs, it was very, very strong, and that happened 6 months. Elizabeth Edmonston with her son, a year. There's a SAS trooper that wrote the book. He had something similar where his mum died. He had a dream of her a year before it happened. So, yeah, I don't know. The stock market ones normally, they've always been long term. So I was surprised when Sabre went up after a month, even, yeah, technically speaking. And that's why I actually held on to it. So, and I'm still hoping.
Because what's interesting is you're like in the case when you're dealing with these skeptics, it's like you're trying to achieve a goal and you seem to have the dream at the right time to make this prediction. And then you can make your prediction. And it's sort of, you know what I mean? Like, so you always have the dream in the right time frame to give you the prediction.
Yeah.
Whether they agree with it at a later point, you know, that's another argument altogether. But it's almost like whether it's your subconscious or whatever's happening in your dream state, it seems to get triggered or operate at precisely the right time when it needs to in order to give you the information you want.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite interesting. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Yeah.
And did you ever try raising the argument with the skeptics that, okay, I've had all these coincidences, and you might pick each one individually and say, oh, well, that was a coincidence, that's a coincidence. I mean, but they're really, really like close coincidences. But when you add them all up, you have all of these situations where you've had a really close coincidence. You know, surely that in itself is, how can you say that all of that together is a coincidence?
Yeah.
Did you ever try that argument with them?
No, it's black and white. I've discovered it can't happen because it can't happen.
I think they just don't want to give up their $100,000.
I don't think they'd put the $100,000 there if they thought they were going to have to pay it out.
Yeah.
In my humble opinion.
Yeah. Did anyone have any other questions? Yes.
Sometimes having also like in a fully waking state.
Right. So do you ever have premonitions in a waking state?
Not premonitions, but when I was in the army and I was on guard duty, I sensed that there was someone behind me and they were quite a distance behind me, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I turned around and went down the hill to where this corporal was checking some instruments in the refrigeration, and he couldn't work out how I knew he was there. Also, when I spoke about ESP in the army, again, when I was in Brisbane, in a crowded room, I was the only person that heard a guy calling for help, and I went out and found him and saved his life. He'd been mugged, which was a very rare occurrence. Like, I'd never seen it happen in the army barracks before, and he was just wearing his jocks and he was out in the open, and he would have been left there overnight. So not so much premonitions, but I've been the person that's picked up on things like that. Yeah.
Well, I've got a question to the audience. Who's convinced that that James has psychic capabilities?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Yeah. Well, we would pay you the $100,000, you know, if we could. You deserve it.
Well, thank you. And there's been some really good questions. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any last burning questions before we wrap up? No? Okay, that's it. Thank you very much,
nice
James.
to meet you all. Bye.